Hi everyone, this is Jacqueline from She Rises Studios, and welcome to Light the Torch ceremony where we spotlight powerful authors and transformative stories. And today we are thrilled to honor Glen Alex in her empowering new book, Living Boundaries, Affirming Your Line in the Sand to Preserve Your Health and Well-Being. Glen Alex, LCSW, and award-winning author of Living in Total Health returns with a must read that dives deep into the real meaning of boundaries, not just the self help buzzword, but as a foundational pillar of mental, emotional, and relational wellness. In Living Boundaries, Glenn helps readers understand that boundaries go far beyond saying no. They're about context, communication, mental clarity, and ultimately self respect. So get ready to redefine what it means to protect your peace. Hi, Glenn. Welcome to the show.
Oh, good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. Well, we are very excited for this second book. Your first book, Living in Total Health, made such an impact. What inspired you to write Living Boundaries as your follow up book?
Well, for living in total health, I wanted to address wholeness. Some people only
Hmm.
focus on physical health or finances. We are whole creatures, and when we ignore parts of ourselves, that's when we fall into imbalance, unhealth, and can be harmful to ourselves and other people. And part of our wholeness are boundaries. And in my work with adults who are experiencing anxiety and depression, a lot of that stems from poor boundaries. So I
Hmm.
wanted to expand on the boundaries chapter in Living in Total Health and just focus solely on boundaries and how the different aspects of unhealth are impacted by poor boundaries.
That is so true. A lot of us have blurred boundaries, which can be income, stressful. What was your personal turning point that showed you just how vital boundaries are for our total health?
Well, my introduction to boundaries actually started in childhood. I am the youngest of 10, so come from a
Mm.
broken family, so had many opportunities to watch people interact and engage. And that just captivated my attention, particularly because I was a shy, quiet child. I would just sit and watch.
Hmm.
And so I can see when those invisible lines were crossed and when they were respected. I could tell by the cringes and the pain on people's faces and the smiles that there was something else going on that wasn't visible. Intellectually, I didn't know what boundaries were as a child, though as I grew up, it became more and more clear. And in writing Living in Total Health, it became more clear to me that the boundaries really are foundational to our wholeness.
That's true. That's true. Now, a lot of people, as you've mentioned, boundaries, they get crossed often.
Mhm.
And many people think that by just saying no, you are already, you're not allowing people to cross your boundaries. But this particular book, you write the boundaries involve more than just saying no. Can you explain a little further on that?
Absolutely. I see boundaries as our innate alarm system that is monitored 24/7 by the intuition. And to find yourself in the position of having to say yes or having to say no tells me that you haven't properly guarded yourself before that point. You've not
Hmm.
paid attention to the alarm system going off, so to speak, and warning you that there was more to come.
That's true. Now, how do you define a healthy boundary in a relationship? How does it differ from being controlling or distant?
Well, first of all, boundaries are contextual. They are not static. And so a boundary in
Hmm.
a relationship will depend on who's involved, the context of the situation, the duration of the situation, and where you are mentally and emotionally at the time. So, one example that I share in the book, and there are more than 50 real life examples in the book, is friends when they are sharing personal information, they might sit really closely to each other. Yet when they're in a heated disagreement, there's going to be more distance. So by being alerted to our alarm system and the intuition, we know in the moment what the proper choice is for us.
And that's very, that's a very wonderful thing to know. Uh, you when you mentioned that boundaries are, it's not static, it's context. It depends on what's happening at that particular moment and with whoever you are having that moment with. What are some of the biggest mistakes people make when they're trying to communicate what their boundary is at that particular moment?
I think sometimes people will bite their tongue too much. If if it's not an immediate no, then it could be let me think about it. I'll get back,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm not comfortable with, instead of just mumming up and then letting it harbor and fester, and then it builds and builds and builds. So the next time, then there's this explosion.
That's wonderful. Just being honest and truthful at that particular moment, letting them know that I'm not comfortable about this right now. I
Hmm.
may be comfortable later on, but right now I am not. And this is the boundaries that I'm setting at this moment. That's wonderful. You're right that boundary issues are tied to health challenges like stress, anxiety, and depression. How does that connection play out in real life?
Well, for some people, um, I actually have a client who she has panic attacks when she's
Mm.
angry
Oh.
because she hasn't said no or set appropriate limits before that. Then when she gets
Hmm.
angry, because anger is not acceptable to her, it transforms into a panic attack. And so that also serves as a distraction from acknowledging and dealing with the anger and the trigger for the anger.
Hmm.
So now um, she's mentally ill, is what people would call her.
Right, right. When in actuality, it's just, setting up that particular boundary for everybody, depending on the context at that time, at the moment, um, can eventually improve everything else in your life. Now, how far do you think can we reduce anxiety, these anxieties or relationship stresses or conflict if we are able to set our boundaries in a way that is healthy for everyone?
Oh, I think it might improve 90% of relationship issues because there's clarity about
Hmm.
who's responsible for what, how we'll engage in disagreement, how we engage in agreement. It 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 makes it clear. So part
Hmm.
of a boundary issue, and this relates to the emotional boundary that I describe in the book, is guessing and assuming you know what the other person wants, or assuming they know what you
Right.
want. If they don't give it to you, then you get upset. And if there's that clarity, though, that, okay, when I don't feel well, I don't want to be touched. Okay? When I'm excited about something, give me a hug or an accolade. Okay, so there's that clarity.
That's awesome. I love that. Now, one other thing that's very great about this second book is are your practical guides. Living Boundaries includes over 50 real life examples.
Yes.
What's one scenario from your book that resonates most, you think, with your readers?
Oh, that's a difficult question because the readers will come from different walks of life and different
Mm-hmm.
circumstances. I would say that book, and this one comes to mind, came to mind first when you asked the question.
Mm-hmm.
Was in when I was in college, I went on a date with a young man who I was very interested in, And over dinner, all he talked about was what his ex girlfriend did wrong. That is a serious red flag. Okay, we're having this moment to get to know each other, and all you can talk
Yeah.
about is what the other person did wrong. So that suggested to me that if I were a people pleaser, I would have attempted to do better. I would have attempted to show him, you know, this, that, and the other, which would have compromised my integrity. So again, that's when we say we don't speak our truth, we don't live into our truth, we externalize our power and our
Hmm.
validation, and that needs to come from within, and that's what the boundaries are for. So that example just stands out for me as this isn't right, and so I'm going to not go any further than this dinner, and I didn't.
Aw, that's wonderful. And I love that you mentioned that for people pleaser, because I'm sure there's so many of us that, are just there trying to please everybody, making sure that everybody around us is happy,
Mm-hmm.
which compromises our own boundaries.
Yes.
For people pleasers who would like to start setting those boundaries, where do you think they can start?
I suggest they start with um, just prioritizing the people in their lives,
Mm,
and starting with what is the most important um, tasks and activities to engage in, like, feeding the children, clothing the children, making sure they're nourished, or giving your partner quality time rather than answering the phone every time the screen calls because the friend's life is in chaos. So it's
correct.
about prioritizing what is the most important and most impactful in your life. And people pleasers, they want to fix everything. They want to, and they don't want anyone to be angry with them or to withhold love, which is something all of us humans need. Yet, once you identify the priorities in your life, then you're okay with the store clerk not smiling at you. Then you're okay with not answering the call every time that best friend calls because something else is going on. You have this here in front of you that requires your attention.
Mhm.
Prioritizing, I think, is the first step there, and that will make it easier to say no, not now. Let me think about it. I'm not comfortable with.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Start with the people closest to you,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's just easier to move that boundary and have clarity on where your boundaries are. And if you could give one, if you could give light to one torch of wisdom for our viewers about boundaries, what is that one truth you wish everyone understood, and what it would be as a closing remark?
The one defining factor and aspect of boundaries for me is your intuition. It is very present. It is in the here and the now, and your intuition, your inner wisdom, your internal intellect, whatever you want to call it, that part of us that we're born with. It communicates with us all the time about what's working and what isn't working. So our intuition also lets us know green flags as well as red flags. So if we're listening to our intuition and not blowing it off and saying, oh, well, this person is smarter, stronger, prettier, richer, they know better than I do,
Mm-hmm.
then uh, all of us, I think individually we'd be healthier and collectively we'd be healthier. There'd be fewer isms, fewer wars, less oppression, less violence overall. If we just listen to that part of us that we're born with that knows it all.
That's wonderful. And it's in everyone. It's inside of us.
Yes.
So we should just start listening. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Glenn.
You
Well,
are very
everyone, Glen Alex has once again given us more than a book. Living Boundaries is a roadmap for living well, living whole, and living free. So, whether you're struggling with toxic relationships, burnout, or emotional weight, always putting others first, this book gives us the permission, the practical steps to draw your line in the sand and protect what matters most, which is our own well-being. This is about reclaiming your voice, your values, your vitality. Living Boundaries is now available on Amazon. Please go ahead, grab your copy today. Like, thanks again, Glenn, so much, and congratulations on your second book. We will see you again next time.
Okay, thank you so much, Jacqueline and She Rises Studios.